Good morning, everybody. So first of all, digitization, right? I think this has become now a buzzword in our industry. Everybody's talking about digitization. What I'm going to try to do is share with you our views of what does it mean to be digital and how do you get on that journey of digitization. And in the process, I promise you that I am going to refrain from doing a sales pitch on T-Systems or Deutsche Telekom, but excuse me if I slip in a few facts highlighting what we're doing as a company to digitize ourselves or help our clients digitize as we go forward. So the reality is, whether you think about digital as a buzzword or you think about it as a new thing that everybody wants to talk about, it is a reality. Right? Things are happening around us, and technology is driving a significant change in the industry. And if you don't move, if you don't adopt, if you don't leverage the technology, you'll be left behind. Now, the interesting thing about technology, it's not new for all of us, is the speed of change that we're experiencing. And if you look over the last several decades, the speed has been enormous. And the challenge for us as a businesses is not that the new technology are coming, it's the speed and how long each disruptive cycle is lasting. And I'll give you a few examples. So if you think about electricity, electrification, about 100 years ago, right, beginning of 1900s. And if you think about where we are today in using electricity around the world, I'm not sure how many of you know, but it's only covering 85% of the populations. 85%. There's still 1 billion people without electricity in the world. Now fast forward and think about mobile devices. Think about mobile phones. In the last 20 years, we have about 100% penetration of mobile phones compared to the human population in the world. Another subset of that, if you think about smartphones, and just in the last 8 years, they're reaching about 100% subscription rate. So if you think about that wave cycles, if you think about the speed, that's what we need to get used to. So let me give you a few examples. National Geographic, I'm sure many of you know National Geographic, right? This is an amazing story because in 1888, which is when the company became known, it was truly a print media. And it became a leader very, very quickly in the domain that it was serving. Now, this company almost went out of business about 20 years ago. And if you look at them today, if you look at what are they doing today from a business perspective, you see that they are on TV. Actually, more interesting to see is how embedded they are in other media, whether they're photographs, whether the events that they cover, that they've embedded themselves into different medias to drive their business model. And they're thriving better than ever. Another example is Apple. And a lot of people talk about Apple, but I started my career in PC business. So my first job was designing chips and systems in PC industry. At that time, it was booming, and I'm talking about early 1990s. I'm sure you remember the Macintosh. But I'm not sure how many of you remember the fact that Apple almost went out of business in that period of time. They brought Steve Jobs back after a fallout, and in 2007, I think it was January 2007, they introduced the iPhone. But not only they introduced the iPhone, they introduced a totally different dynamic about where they want to take their company. They dropped the computer from Apple computer name, and if you fast forward into 2015, 2/3 of their revenue and a bigger percentage of their profits is coming from the iPhone. And it's not only the device. It is really the ecosystem that they build. So those are examples of how people change and how disruptive technology evolve. Now, if you look at what do the companies need to do in order to adopt? What do they need to think about as these new technologies come in? Of course, many of us think about changes and how fast we need to do. But one thing I'd like to leave with you is, number one, you got to get used to the speed. Speed is now the way you need to adopt. But it's not just about technology. It's about how do you leverage that technology to drive your business. Another example I would use with you is Legos. We know Lego as a company that started with a brick and mortar. Right? That's where they were. It's toys, physical things. They sold them in toy stores. But they became under incredible threat as new gaming, new consoles were introduced and had to reinvent themselves. Today, they actually have a whole new ecosystem called Lego Life. And it goes from the old building blocks that they have created into games, into programming, into consoles, into social media. It's an incredible story on how this company evolved in order to think about how do I drive a different business model, how do I generate a different profit pool from the core of the business as I'm in. Another industry that's going through interesting dynamics is the news industry. Today we have trusted sources with people like Handelsblatt, The Times, BBC, but that industry at its core, it's fundamentally challenged. And if the industry doesn't change itself, it will disappear. Now, if I ask you the question, if you think back and try to remember, what is the one innovation, what is the one technology that changed your life? And I play this game with my kids, but also ask my grandpa, well, what do you think is the most innovation that impacted your life? And he would say a car, a TV, in the healthcare industry, probably an MRI, iPhone, Airbnb. If I ask my kids, they'll tell you Uber, right? They can't imagine a world without Uber today in sharing or WhatsApp and things like that. So reality is, as businesses, as consumers, we have gotten used to adopting industries, adopting technologies. And we're getting used to more and more speed in how the industries and technologies change. And by the way, enterprises, large enterprises, it's the same. If you think about SAP as an example, we've gone through 5 generations of SAP technology, right? R1, R2, R3, My SAP, HANA. So it is changing, it is driving change. So the message for us is, how do we adapt to that change? How do we make sure that we are not afraid of the technology, that we adopt it and we love it and we move forward with it? Now, in the early stages of digitization, it was about substitution, right? So instead of having a CD, it's streaming music. Instead of shopping in a store, it was going online. Today, it's becoming more about new business models. It's becoming more about disruptive technologies that fundamentally change where you can make money. And they all come in different flavors. They all come in different views. And one impression that everybody have is, I have to be first. And I'll talk about being first in a few minutes. But if you think about the GAFAnomics, and I love this term, GAFAnomics. I don't know if you know this term, you've heard this term. It's Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. If you think about that change agents, the change agents that created different industries, none of them were the first movers. As a matter of fact, if you think about Google and Amazon, They were early adopters, right? They were absolutely watching the industry. They were changing. They were learning from. How many of you remember AOL, America Online, that made Boris Becker well-known globally and made him a lot of money? Where are they today? Right? So these, I mean, how many online retailers did we have? Right? It's amazing, right? How many, if you think about how many iterations of online retailers we have. But what these guys did, what Google and Amazon have done, is watch the competition, adapted to it, and made it something different. Now, if you think about Facebook and Apple, they were followers. They were not even early adopters. They were followers. You remember Friendster, you remember Sony's, you remember, how many of you remember Palm? I mean, Palm was the leader in the industry. I mean, they were, in terms of personal organizer, they were the leader. I mean, they got to a point where they had 2 million devices sold, and we're talking about a period when 2 million really mattered. What about BlackBerry and RIM? Facebook and Apple watched and learned, and the one thing that's common between the four of them is client centricity. So what they've done is, as they learned, as they adopted, they kept the client at the center of what they're trying to do. So they drove their models based on what does their customer really want. How can I provide a better experience? And not think about the technology itself. And this is where a lot of companies really lose it, right? It immediately shifts into a technology view rather than a particular solution for the client. And I'll give you an example of something that's very close to us as a company, which is T-Mobile US. T-Mobile USA, 10 years ago, in 2008, was a company that was struggling for success. We had huge churns. We had outdated networks. We had products that were not successful in the market. And yes, we invested in technology. We put a lot of effort in technology, billions and billions. But what the team really did well is put the client first. And they created this movement called the Un-carrier movement. And what the team focused on is eliminating everything that bothers the client. So, no complicated bills. If you look at the tariff plans, simplified tariff plans. No wait times when the customers call. Targeted offering for clients that really matter to them. We went from 33 million subscribers in 2008 to over 73 million today. We more than doubled our company in about 10 years. And if you ask our team in the US, well, how did you do it? This is how they did it. They did it by focusing on the client. Now, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is technology, right? What I'd like you to accept for a second is take technology for granted, because we get stuck a lot of times thinking about how do I use this particular technology to drive my business versus how do I improve my business leveraging technology. Take technology for granted. And we as Deutsche Telekom, obviously, we're at the core of the technology, right? Connectivity, connecting things, making sure everybody's got an ability to communicate. You're able to get online. You're able to connect via phones. You're able to connect machines, etc. Last year, we spent 13 billion euros in building our infrastructures. We have 455,000 kilometers in Germany of fiber optics. It's a given. We put 40,000 extra kilometers last year, 60,000 this year. We target to have 20 million households with fast connections. But that's a given. It's not the reason why companies will succeed. So we think about how do you leverage this technology? How do you create different business models? So we've created different businesses like IoT. We've created security business that focuses on how do I secure our networks, etc. So to me, the message to you is think about technology as a given, not as a reason to connect. And I have an example of a client, our client, which is Kaiser. And Kaiser is, it's close to us because I met the owner. Okay, so today what we do with Kaiser is they have these high-value cases that their technicians use. And within these high-value cases, there are the critical equipment that the technicians need in order to make sure they calibrate their compressors and make sure that they're very, very productive when they come in. So we connected these cases. We want to make sure that they're tracked, but more importantly, what Kaiser wanted to do is make sure that they know that the battery is full, that no equipment is missing in the case, so when the technician shows up at the customer site, they're efficient. Not efficient in order to optimize their maintenance crews, but efficient to make sure that the client gets the service that they committed to. So I met Mr. Kaiser in Mobile World Congress a few months ago. And this gentleman was running around Mobile World Congress, looking around different exhibits. And I asked him, what are you looking for? And he said, listen, I am thinking on how do I provide compressed air as a service. That's what my customers want. They don't want to pay for extra time. They don't want to pay for extra maintenance. They don't want to pay only for what they use. And I'm trying to figure out how do I make that happen. I mean, that is absolutely the mentality that somebody has when it comes to digitizing their business. Versus, there's a great sensor here, how can I put it in my compressor? So those are just examples of what is happening. Now, if you think about then how do you start, right? How do you actually get going? Today, we see a lot of companies with digital officers showing up in their organization charts. You see people chasing this digital discussion with consultants, with trying to figure out how do we just create projects. Now, in reality, a lot of people are still struggling to figure out how do they do it. How do they make it happen? And I'll tell you, one advice we give our clients is you have to start with the people. Because people make it happen, right? You got to accept the fact that you have speed in how things are moving. You got to accept the fact that technology is a given. You don't have to be first, but you have to start with the people. You got to be courageous. Don't hesitate. The one thing that's very, very important to realize in digitization is failure is an option. It is going to happen. And if you think about Apple, you think about Facebook, you think about Google, you think about the most successful companies we have today in the marketplace, the reality is they all had failures. And if you learn from the failures, then you'll be successful. As long as you learn fast and you stop the things that are failing as quick as you can. But then you have to build the team. You have to create a team. And the thing that we always major on is you have to remove the obstacles that the team will have. Because in reality, when there is something new, when there is a new business model that you're trying to bring to the market, there'll be obstacles. And our business is no different. Any business has legacy. And legacy typically is the one that's generating majority of the profit today. So when you bring something new, the natural tendency is for the legacy business, the established business, is to squash that something new. It will never work. We've tried it. It will be a failure. So our advice is make sure you remove these obstacles. You either do it through different organization designs, you do it by giving the new things a table around the boardroom so they can compete for the investments, just like the mature businesses compete to them. And we have an example in our company. We just created a digital services, digital solutions team. And what we had in T-Systems is this little tribes of different units that were doing digital work, whether it's front end or back end, but they were all doing it as tribes. They were all doing it like ConkWorks. They were doing it outside of the structure of T-Systems. So what we've done is we brought them all together under a leader and gave them a seat at the table, at the boardroom. And that is the only way we believe we can make progress and go forward. And then finally, what I'd like to leave with you is the 5 business principles that I think work extremely well in a business that tries to digitize. And these are not your core beliefs. These are not your fundamentals. They're more of a business principles. And how do you want to run a business if you want to digitize? How do you take advantage of the new technology that's coming around? And I'll tell you, the first thing, and hopefully that was clear from the example, is you got to put the client at the center of everything you do. You have to. If you don't, you will struggle to compete in the marketplace. Second is not be afraid of innovation and technology. Adopt it. Take it for granted. Third, teamwork and collaboration. Remove the obstacles, remove the silos. Because when you create teamworks, success is much easier to get to than if you're trying to do it with individual heroes or in silos. Operational excellence, the mentality needs to be, I have to be better every year. Every year I got to be better, whether it's in my efficiency, productivity, my services to the client, the feature functions that I provide to my clients, the services that I provide to our clients, etc. And then finally, it's the foundation of how do you succeed, and that is people make it happen. Those are just very few pointers that I hope are going to be helpful to you as you go around this fair and look at all of the new technology, new solutions to help you digitize. Thank you.
Adel, thank you. One question, please. If you talk to your very own employees within T-Systems, this wouldn't sound very differently, right?
Absolutely. This is exactly from what we talk to our employees and our clients.
Your own challenge.
Absolutely.
Like every others.
Absolutely. Got exactly the same challenge.
Good luck and do it fast. I guess it's an imperative to do that quickly, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Adel.
Thank you. Thank you.